Alexander the Great is one of history's greatest generals. Born in the summer of 356 BC in the city of Pella, capital of the Greek kingdom of Macedon, he was the son of King Philip II and one of his many wives, Olympias. The story of Alexander's birth has been mythologized, like many figures from his time and level of influence. Supernatural forces supposedly influenced his birth. For example, Olympias dreamt that a lightning bolt struck her womb, causing a fire that consumed all of the land. Ancient historian Plutarch suggested that these visions possibly meant that Alexander was actually the son of Zeus, god of the skies. Philip was the 23rd king of the Argead dynasty who originated in the city of Argos, and claimed to be descended from Heracles, better known by his Roman name Hercules. They eventually came to rule Macedon. However, Philip's claim to the throne was uncertain. In his youth, he was sent to the most important Greek city of the time, Thebes, where he was educated and made many connections. Upon returning to Macedon, he was able to claim the throne. After leading Macedon in a series of wars, Philip controlled the entire Greek world, including the tenacious Sparta. Alexander's mother, Olympias, was a princess from the Greek city of Epirus. Her family claimed to descend from Achilles, a central character in Homer's Iliad. When Alexander was away at war, she was the de facto ruler of Macedon. When he was very young, Alexander was raised by a nurse, whose brother, Cletus the Black, would come to be one of Alexander's generals. Alexander studied under the famous philosopher Aristotle, among other great thinkers. During this time, he met many of his future companions, as well as Achaemenid exiles, who provided a lot of information on the great empire east of Macedon. When Alexander was just 10 years old, Philip rejected a horse who nobody was able to tame. However, Alexander wanted to take this challenge on. After some time, he was able to tame the horse, and he gave the horse a name which translates to bull-headed. In response to Alexander taming this horse, Philip responded, "My son, you must find another kingdom to rule, for Macedon is much too small for you." Little did he know what his son would soon accomplish. Alexander became king in 356 BC at the age of 20. However, even at this young age, he was more than ready to be a great leader. While his father was still alive and away at war, Alexander led an effort to stop an assault from the region of Thrace. He was also tasked with raising an army to ensure continued Macedonian rule of the many Greek cities to the south. Nearing the end of Philip's life, Alexander had nearly become his equal. They co-commanded armies together, and Alexander is even credited in saving his father's life. However, there was a desire in Macedon for the successor to Philip to be fully Macedonian, and Alexander's mother was not Macedonian. Philip was assassinated in 336 BC, and to ensure Alexander's claim to the throne, many contenders, mostly his cousins and half-siblings, were killed. Early into his rule, Alexander made sure the territory conquered by his father was firmly under Macedonian control. The north, specifically Thrace, was his main focus. However, the powerful cities of Athens and Thebes wanted autonomy and revolted. Alexander responded by destroying the city of Thebes, which scared the Athenians into submission. With the northern border secure and the Greek cities under control, the goal for most of his remaining years was to take control of the Achaemenid Empire, one of the famous empires of Persia. For centuries, the Greeks wanted to take down the Achaemenids in revenge for wars in previous centuries. Before his death, Philip stationed troops in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. However, upon the king's death, they were demoralized and the Achaemenids were able to defeat them. A few short years later, Alexander led troops back into the peninsula, and after the Battle of Granicus, Macedon controlled the regional capital of Sardis. The two armies faced off, staring at each other across the Granicus River. Alexander's forces attacked the left side of the Persian front, where the bulk of the Persian cavalry was gathered. The Macedonians were fighting uphill, and eventually had to temporarily retreat, but the Persians were now disorganized and spread out. This allowed the Macedonians to take control. Alexander himself killed a relative of the Persian emperor Darius III, and Cletus the Black saved Alexander from an attack from behind. The Persian center gave way and they retreated, leaving the Greeks as the victors. The Greeks headed south, and soon the second major battle of the war began. At the Battle of Issus, Alexander's forces would face off with a force commanded by Darius himself. Far outnumbered, the Macedonians again were forced to retreat early on, but afterwards, a group of infantry led by Alexander broke through. The Greeks took on Darius's bodyguards, and soon enough the Achaemenid king fled. The rest of his forces soon followed. The wife, mother, and daughters of Darius were captured, but they were treated with great respect by Alexander. One daughter, Stateria, later became Alexander's second wife. The third major battle was the siege of Tyre. Tyre was a city on a small island off the coast of Lebanon. The siege lasted months in the year 332 BC. Alexander ordered a bridge to be built near the city and towers with catapults on top to be carried across to make the assault possible, although the geography of the island made these feats of engineering vulnerable. The people of Tyre fought fiercely, and Alexander's forces faced many losses. However, Alexander had an ally, the king of Cyprus. Cyprus had their own reasons to hate the Achaemenids, and so they sent ships to assist Alexander in taking Tyre. Now with a navy, Alexander was able to secure victory. Tyre was taken, and with it, the Achaemenids no longer had any access to the Mediterranean. That is, except for Egypt. Alexander took control of Egypt with little resistance. To them, it was more like being liberated from Achaemenid rule rather than being conquered. Alexander was crowned as pharaoh in 332 BC. He rebuilt infrastructure and temples and reformed taxation, leading to an overall better life for many Egyptians. He founded the new city, Alexandria, in the process. But at this point, Alexander's narcissism became more and more clear. You see, Egyptian pharaohs aren't just simple kings, they are gods in human flesh. Alexander already believed himself to be a god. Remember, he was the son of Zeus after all. At his coronation, he was declared son of Amun, a powerful Egyptian god. From then on, Alexander claimed Zeus Amun to be his true father. After a short time in Egypt, Alexander headed west. Darius regrouped his dwindling forces in Babylon and tried to negotiate with Alexander to preserve his empire. But Alexander wanted to fight to determine who was the rightful king of Asia. The war would reach its climax at the Battle of Gaugamela. Alexander crossed the Tigris River, which was extremely difficult at the time, and since Darius assumed Alexander would take an easier route, the Persians were caught off guard. A few days following a lunar eclipse, the fighting began. Darius and the Immortals were in the center, and Alexander ordered his phalanx to face them. At the same time, Alexander took his cavalry and tried to outflank the Persians. The Persians did the same, and a massive fight on horseback began. The Persian line was separated once again, just like in previous battles, and Darius fled. Alexander decided not to pursue, because following Darius would put his entire army at risk. This kind of discipline is what won the battle for Alexander in the end. He was outnumbered, but he was able to make the Persians sell out. Darius got away, but soon after he was murdered by some of his satraps, which are like governors in Persia. Alexander was not happy about this. He had great respect for Darius and wished for the two to fight one-on-one. Darius was given an extravagant and honorable burial by Alexander. Now nothing stopped Alexander from invading the Persian homeland. They looted temples and palaces, and during a long night of drinking, Persepolis, the capital city, was burned. Alexander woke up and regretted this decision immediately. Some accounts state that Alexander confronted a statue of Xerxes and spoke with it for hours, asking whether he hated him for past transgressions against Greece or respected him for his leadership and power. Alexander's narcissism was now in full swing. He attempted to sway the Persian elite, demanding treatment reserved for gods in their culture. This angered the Greeks, who were soon plotting against his life. Alexander had many people killed after learning about the assassination plans. It was around this time where Alexander committed one of his worst crimes. Drunk from wine, he took a spear and threw it through the chest of Cletus the Black, killing the man who saved his life, whose sister was like a mother to him, because he dared show the slightest disagreement to the king. Alexander continued to fight eastward, taking land in modern Afghanistan, Tajikistan, and eventually India, where his army finally had enough. They had been fighting for years and wished to return home safely. India was strange and terrifying to them. They battled their way out of India, where Alexander was seriously injured by an arrow. They made their way back to Persia and learned that some of the satraps misbehaved in his absence. One group vandalized the statue of Cyrus the Great, a man Alexander admired greatly. They were all executed. During his journey back to Macedon, Alexander fell ill, or was poisoned depending on who you ask. He died in Babylon early in the summer of 323 BC at the young age of 32. Although a great military leader, Alexander hadn't planned on dying so soon. His generals fought amongst themselves after his death, and soon enough Alexander's conquests were divided. The general Ptolemy inherited Egypt, and also was able to claim Alexander's body, which gave them legitimacy as the true successors to the kingdom. The Seleucid Empire formed out of Babylon and Persia, which made up the largest area of Alexander's conquest. This gave them legitimacy of their own. Macedon itself went through a series of Greek rulers for hundreds of years until it was finally taken control by the Romans. Macedon itself was controlled by a series of Greek rulers until the Romans finally took control hundreds of years down the line. Alexander the Great influenced many future generals and leaders. Julius Caesar, Hannibal, Napoleon, George Washington, among many others. He has been depicted in art and media for thousands of years and continues to fascinate millions of people. Even though he fought many battles, often outnumbered, he had never lost once. Undefeated. He conquered the most powerful empire in the world at the time, and many cities which even thousands of years ago had thousands of years of history. Thanks for watching. What's your opinion on Alexander the Great? Do you have any questions? Put them in the comments below. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up. And if you want to see future videos, make sure you subscribe. Thank you.